Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very weird, dark Tuesday afternoon. I'm Will Strick, Director of Product Development for Atomic Mass Games. I'm very excited to be with you today as we ramp up to our Thursday live stream game of the Dormammu Ultimate Encounter for Marvel Crisis Protocol. So we're going to be playing on Thursday, myself, Dallas Kemp, and Will Pagani. We're going to be showing off the Ultimate Encounter that comes with the Dormammu Marvel Crisis Protocol character pack. It's a super blast. One of the biggest pieces of that Ultimate Encounter are the terrain pieces that come in Dormammu's pack. So you get two of these dark dimensional incursion pieces, and you also get a portal. Today we thought it'd be fun if we just showed some ideas and had a little bit of a fun time jiving on one of these dark dimensional terrain pieces. So I'm gonna hop this camera off of me, get it onto our miniature. We're gonna start working for the course of this hour. So this is one of the two dark dimensional incursion terrain pieces that comes with the Dormammu Ultimate Encounter pack. You use both of these along with the portal in the game. It's really an important nexus for both the Dormammu player and for the Crisis team players. They're going to have to visit these several times throughout the course of the game in order to succeed at their mission, whether you're playing Dormammu and trying to break your way into our dimension or you're trying to stop the incursion from happening. These become pretty big hotspots. I really love how this whole weird terrain turned out. It was really fun to do Jack Kirby designs and all that stuff. We called them dimensional Cocoa Puffs quite a bit while we were working on the design and everything and kind of going through. So with that in mind, there's no real right or wrong way to paint these. I've looked at a lot of different reference pieces and they can be just about any color. So we're just going to try to do some weird mystical stuff. I want this to look like it is concrete or like somewhere in the city that's being broken into. If you wanted to do a whole dark dimension terrain, you could certainly just paint this like a weird purple alien rock color or whatever fits your table. But we're just going to have some fun. We're going to wet blend some colors together. We're going to make some cool stuff hopefully happen. The first thing I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with some yellows because I want this part of the portal to be kind of like orangey yellow, and then we're going to do magentas and blues for the actual dark dimension items themselves. That'll give us a nice contrast. It should look pretty cool. So that's where we're going to start. So I'm going to start off with these two colors. I have some yellow ink and a little Madruk yellow. I'm going to mix these together in order to get a nice flowy kind of yellow base coat that I can then start using with my Tiamat orange and some other colors to wet blend together and create hopefully a really nice smooth surface. And I'm going to grab one of my junkier brushes from across the way. When you're painting terrain, it's best not to use your super nice brushes except for really fine detail work. I also have some cheap makeup brushes that I'll be using as well. Overall, the goal here is to just have the biggest brush that you have available to you so that you can work it pretty quick. And I'm just going to start by slapping this color on, and it's not going to have perfect coverage because I did mix that ink in it, but that's okay because we just want it to be really vibrant. I want it to stay kind of working wet for a little bit so that I can also blend, do a little wet blending on the mini itself. And I'm not super concerned about going over the dimensional ball that's coming through the bottom because that's going to be a deeper color. So it's not as big of a concern. Like the magentas and the blues should play right over that color pretty nice and evenly. And you could do the balls first and then do the yellows if you wanted to. And any kind of spillover would give you that feeling of some OSL, a little object source lighting, a little cheat there. So you could save this part for last if you wanted it to be glowy. But I'm not really looking to do any kind of OSL necessarily on this. So with that in mind, I'm okay with the idea that we don't need to worry about the spillovers. And if I really wanted to go back and add that, I could just use some of my ink washes and stuff and do more of a traditional OSL kind of effect. But I'll be honest, I'm not a big OSL painter kind of person. I don't typically like doing it. So I'm just going to avoid that completely. We'll keep moving. Next up, I'm going to grab some Tiamat orange and get that on my palette here. And I'm going to take a little bit of red and yellow ink. If you had a pre-mixed orange ink or an orange wash, you could use that as well. But the Inktense colors from Scale don't really have anything, so I find myself always having to mix that up. And I'm just going to kind of work this together. And I'm going to come back through and I'm going to start blending these two colors. So to start, I'm just kind of going to like put the orange over the yellow. And I'm going to grab my other brush. I'll swap it out, come back through, start adding my yellow back in. And you see that I'm just going to start mixing these two colors directly on the mini itself. And this will hopefully give us a nice little like energy swirl, these nice blends. And I like wet blending because you can play with it for almost forever. And if you feel like you mess it up, you just go back through, grab some more paint for whatever you want. For example, I want it darker down here and come in, grab some more orange, work that into the crevices and stuff. The more you blend, the more color shift you'll have. On big areas like this, you can either add a lot of mixing medium into your paints to make them work longer. You can use more ink, a little bit more water. The working time matters. Or you can just work in sections, kind of like I'm doing here. So for this part, I've just decided to kind of focus on this particular section. And then from there, I can go back and I'll work each section in tandem. Well, you can see how we're getting these nice, like we went from this bright yellow to getting these nice little gradations and blends. The more yellow we add in, better. The only thing that you really need to watch out for is as your paint dries, you have the tendency to pull up paint. So you have to make sure that your working brush stays wet, that your surface area stays wet. And there is a point at which you do have to leave well enough alone. And you just kind of have to do that by feel. So if you start to notice that your paint isn't going on as smooth, or it feels like you're really pulling up the colors underneath it, that's the point at which you really want to consider pulling back, letting it dry. And then you can always go back through if you want to continue to play with it and do a whole nother section of wet blending. But I have both my brushes. Each brush has a color on it, and that allows me to just kind of like go through and mess with both those colors. As I continue to do this, of course, the colors are going to mix on my brushes, so I will have to go back through and clean them at some point. But you can create some really nice kind of mid-tones and stuff by just letting those colors mix on the brush as well. I'm pretty happy with where that's going. You can see how we have like these nice little lines. So I'm going to shift over. I'll clean out my brushes really quick. Oh yeah, and BK's already telling people in the chat. So if you're not joining us on Twitch, but you're watching us later on YouTube or whatever, Mini Stravaganza 2 is fast approaching. We're looking at September for that. There will be exact dates being posted in the next week or so. So watch our social medias or go check out the website, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. To check out when you can hang out with us for a full 3 days of hobbying, dev panels, playing games this time now that the restrictions have lifted for COVID. So we're going to be doing all kinds of fun stuff, just getting back into the groove, having a blast, really enjoying our time together, showing off really cool stuff. We have a lot of really awesome reveals planned for the weekend. It's going to be really cool, a whole lot of fun. We've been working behind the scenes on some neat stuff for several of the games. So it'll be a good time. And of course, anytime we can just hang out, do some hobbying, talk about games, provide that convention experience I know a lot of us are missing due to the events of the last year. We're always down for that. So again, I'm just continuing my wet blends here, working everything around, shifting between that orange and that yellow. And the nice thing about this is, again, because you're just blending on the miniature, you're going to make some really cool and smooth blends that you can't make any other way. And so, don't overwork it. Don't freak out if it doesn't look quite like the way you want. As it dries, you're going to start to see all these different colors. So you can see how already we have these really cool, I need a little more yellow in my palette. These really cool like blends and these smooth gradations, and we can play with that even more. Of course, you don't have to stick with just 2 colors either. You could very easily get 3 or more colors on your palette if you wanted to and start mixing those up. We could integrate a white in here. The only real trick is just making sure that everything on the miniature stays workable and wet. So as long as you're thinning or using a drying retardant like a flow improver or a medium, you'll be able to kind of continue to work. It's a little bit like, from what I understand, although I haven't done it yet, working with oils, except in this case, we're not really subtracting, we're just adding. We're being very additive with our paints, but the same idea where we're just creating all of the art on the mini itself. It's going to be going. So this beautiful thing's name, this is the Dark Dimensional Incursion terrain. So again, it is used in the Thanos Ultimate Encounter, which you'll get to see exactly how that functions when we play the game on Thursday. And then otherwise, it's just a size 2 piece of terrain that you can put into any of your Crisis Protocol games to kind of set the scene of, your Dormammu like busting through, causing problems, all that good stuff. Pull this down just a little bit. And see, I could spend the whole hour just futzing around with this because it's so much fun. It's like go in and mess with stuff like this. But we're gonna stop here in a second and we're gonna move on. We're gonna get going on the rest of this thing next. So pull in a little bit of yellow. Add some swirls to this. We'll move on. So one of the biggest things that these get used for in the Ultimate Encounter is in the game there's 4 basically incursion portals, and the Crisis team's goal is to shut those portals down. In order to do so, they have to gather spell components. The little dark dimensional terrain pieces are where you can gather spell components. And then the Ultimate Encounter player actually has a couple of minions working for Dormammu to help him out. And his goal is to gather dimensional shards so that he can level himself up. And one of the really cool things about the Thanos Ultimate Encounter, or unlike the Thanos Ultimate Encounter where you kind of started with all the gems and you chose your gems accordingly, in the Dormammu Ultimate Encounter, Dormammu actually has the opportunity to level himself up as the game progresses. So the more that he can complete his objectives, the more powerful he becomes as his incursion grows stronger. It's very cool. It's super terrifying to be on the Crisis teams as he like levels up and starts to become more and more scary and powerful. So you kind of have to play this balancing act of, as the Crisis team, gathering spell components in order to close the incursion portals and stop Dormammu, but also you have to deal with his little minions and Dormammu himself as they try to empower the Dark Lord so that he can really ruin your day and stop you from being able to accomplish all the things you need to do. All right. I think I'm pretty happy with this. We'll let this dry and we'll just kind of see where it goes from here. But you can see how we have these nice, very cool, like fiery kind of feel going on. We'll go back through and maybe do some highlighting and stuff and build that up. The size, this is size 2. You can tell because there's, let's see, whoop, there's the little 2, whoop. So these are just size 2 pieces of terrain, which makes them very, usable and important in Crisis Protocol games. Okay, I'm going to shift over. I'm going to use some fuchsia, basically some magenta. And I'm going to grab some Holder Blue, because we got to use our Holder Blue. I'm going to set up my palette here with some of these colors. And we're just going to start working on the Cocoa Puffs, the dimensional Cocoa Puffs, as we like to call them. And then that was some water. Doing like tactic card pack upgrades and stuff is certainly something we've been discussing. I don't have a timeline or anything on that, but I can tell you that it is something that's been talked about, and I certainly see a future in where that might become a thing as the game continues to progress and grow. Okay, so I'm just gonna come in and do like half this ball with this blue, and then we're gonna grab our other brush. We're coming in, we're gonna do half this ball with this magenta. I'm gonna make this really cool purple. I'm just gonna kind of like swirl it. So you can see, and this is where it's going to be important to keep that brush kind of clean, is wherever we don't want that mixture of purple to go, but we want more of that magenta in there, like those little hot spots. We just clean up the brush. And we come back over here, a little bit more. Maybe we want it to be a little darker down here at the bottom. So we can add some more of that Huldra blue, pull that color over. This one just gives that really nice, already super slick and cool looking color shift and transition. I think color shift paints could work great. I will be honest, the only time I've ever used color shift paints, I painted a cookie jar for one of my wife's friends. As a housewarming gift, she bought a really hideous cookie jar as a gag gift for them, and and she's like, "Will you paint this?" And I was like, "Sure." And so I grabbed some color shift paints and I did a little bit of color shift paints on it just to make it like extra ridiculous looking. So that's kind of my experience with them. But I think they could work really cool, right? From what I know of them, they work really well on larger surfaces, where you can like really start to see that color shift happen. And of course here, you really want that like weird cotton candy ball kind of like sensation going on. So I think that it could be really, really cool. Obviously, you could also use an airbrush on this. The studio ones, which were painted by one Aaron Lovejoy, it looked fantastic, and I know he used a lot of airbrushing stuff on it to get the shifts and the color changes and everything. So I think there's a lot of ways that you can approach this terrain, and obviously I'm using like magentas and blues, which feel very, to me, very dark dimension-y and kind of evoke that idea of the travel through the dark dimension that we see from the MCU. But there's so many other colors that you can use, on the Strange portal that I did when we were painting the new Doctor Strange. I used green and yellow and all that stuff. So there's I think there's a lot of play and fun that you can have with this stuff, and that's part of what makes it really exciting. Anytime there's no like right, there's kind of a right or wrong way to paint a car, I guess. Certainly if you're going for more of like a realistic kind of experience and look. And so it's something that you do have to kind of like think about. But But when it comes to dark dimensional terrain, you know, whatever color you want. And maybe this isn't even from the dark dimension. Maybe it's some other weird alien thing. You know, you've got the deadly meteors mutating everyone downtown. Maybe this is just one of those like deadly meteor mutation things. You know, who knows? I think, and so you could definitely utilize this terrain in a lot of different ways and imagine it being a lot of different things. And I think that's also really cool. So that could affect how you paint it and stuff like that. So. All right, so, but you know, again, I think color shift paints could definitely work really, really well on something like this. And ooh, here's one of the challenges we're working with really wet paints is you got to watch that they don't run and mess up everything that you've done before. But luckily, you can just kind of pull that up, It'll be all right. We can fix that, and we'll actually kind of work to our advantage with this little darkness. The official size is size 2, listed right on the bottom. So these are size 2 pieces of terrain in the thing. Come back through and fix that up later. All right, here we go. And we come back to this. Might as well just do this one next. I'll have to figure out what we want to do with our strings, but I'll just kind of knock this out into. The other thing that I think would work really well on these is fluorescence. You could do a metallic undercoat, like a silver, if you want them to sparkle. And then you could either put the fluorescence over, or you could wet blend like I'm doing here, over the top with really thin, kind of like watered down paints. So, you know, I think there's a lot of fun stuff. There's a lot of things that you could explore with this. Heck, you just use glitter paints if you wanted to, I suppose. You want to be really crazy. Get in there and go for it, you know? And then, of course, if you haven't seen it, Dr. Voodoo, one of my personal, probably for me, the most exciting character that's being released in this wave. My personal favorite, one, Dr. Voodoo. He just got revealed on all the social media channels this morning by one Mr. BK. So if you haven't seen that yet, you should go check it out because it's super awesome. And he is very cool and so much fun coming up with how his possession mechanic and his brother Voodoo, or his brother Daniel would work. And I gave Pagani a few fits about that. I have no doubt with my design and my demands, and it turned out to be a decent amount of text, but I think it came out, it just works so well. It feels so much like Voodoo, and I love the idea that you can send brother Daniel out to just mess with your plans and the way possession works to stop you from being able to do something that's really important in the game. To me, just like really hit the nail on the head for that character. And of course, he's very focused on power manipulation and control, which again, from my standpoint on Brother Voodoo, is exactly what I felt like that character wanted to do and make him interesting. And he fills an interesting role in both the Midnight Suns because of it. And then, of course, he's an Avenger. He's great in Avengers. Up this purple mess that we're making here. Just use it to our advantage a little bit. Start working on these spines. He works great in Avengers. And of course, Convocation, he's got a lot of playing as well. So he fits in great to the 4 slot in a lot of different affiliations, I think. And it's just a fun character to play. He's just enjoyable, and that's such a huge component of the game. So I'm just going to go all magenta for right now. use this other brush. Instead of like wet blending, I might just use it to help pick up some of the wet, runny paint. A lot of the times, my suggestion would be like work on 2 of these or a couple of them or several of them at once. Let one of your sections dry first and then move on to the other, but we only get an hour and I want to knock this puppy out as close as possible in the time limit, so we're just going to let all of our paints mix into one beautiful amalgam. So we'll do our best to keeping things kind of clean and clear, but if we get things mixed up, that's okay. It just makes it more colorful and more like the dark dimension itself. Chaotic, uncontrolled, dangerous. The portal is size 3, I think. I don't have one right next to me, so I can't check, but I'm pretty sure we ended up with a size 3 for the portal. Because the portal, it's not really blocking line of sight. It's definitely a big footprint, but it's not the largest of the things. So I'm pretty sure it wound up at a 3. But everything's got the size listed on the bottom of it as well, so you can check. And if you join us on Thursday, you can always ask again. We'll have everything on the table, and I'll be able to check it right away and tell you for sure. But because I wasn't planning on getting through both this and the portal, I really didn't. I didn't bring both. Oop, let me grab a little bit of this. Just going to mix this into the darker recesses here. A little bit of this. Just get that a little darker. Get a little bit of shadow and purple on the bottoms. Get that pink on the tops. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Fantabulous. It is almost Dormammu time. So I know that several places around the world we've seen Dormammu, Blade, and Moon Knight this Friday, I believe, the 13th. Of course, global shipping logistics, as I say every time, is a bit of a mess right now due to the pandemic and everything else going on in the world around the pandemic. So if you work in logistics, you have all of my gratitude right now for the work that you're trying to do and everything that's going on. And, definitely not a job that I think anyone would envy at this point with everything with all the challenges and everything extra going on. So if you're in the States, I know that there are delays due to the rail system and the backup and just all kinds of craziness going on with that. And the folks at Asmodee who work in the shipping and distribution sections are doing their darndest to try to figure all that out and get things to everyone in a timely fashion as possible. But unfortunately, they don't have control over, the rails and all the different container shortages and pallet shortages, ship shortages, all those things. So even though a lot of things got out on time, they hit the States. There's no trains for them to get them across country, and we have such a vast heartland that, even if it gets to port in one place, it's got to get to all of the distribution centers in Minnesota and stuff like that. So it's It's a very challenging thing that even when everything's going according to plan and smoothly, it's still just as challenging as always. Get these in there, kind of tighten those up. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. We'll have to go back through and just kind of clean up around all these sections, but that will be pretty easy. So we're going to just keep going. Keep on keeping on. Just want to knock out, hold your blue on these balls. And then, I mean, it was a twofer today because I also saw that several of the tactic cards for the convocation went up from the Ancient One and Mordo pack. So everyone's finally getting their first look at how the convocation's tactic cards radically differ from everyone else's team tactic cards in terms of them being magical items and being reusable and all that good stuff. So it's just a lot of cool. We had a lot of fun. I will certainly admit, designing the MCP wizards, as I've seen people refer to them as, not erroneously for sure, was a heck of a lot of fun. We had a blast. So when I use Dr. Voodoo in playtest and just in my rosters, so possession is definitely one of those things where it's not going to come up all the time, I find, for me. I like to use Dr. Voodoo more as a tank in the center. So he's, with his defenses, with Brother Daniel on him, like he is extraordinarily durable. He's got those really high numbers. There is more to his kit that you haven't seen yet as well, I'll say that. Here's a couple of cards that will get shown at some point that also affect some of the play strategies depending on whether or not you decide to take them. So, you know, a little spoiler for the future, I guess, when BK has that on the schedule. But for the most part, I really liked using Voodoo as kind of like a midline, you know, put him on the center point, have him tank. And then in the moments where I really needed, you know, where I was in a position where I had power and I could really mess with my opponents, plans to like score or get ahead, or if I needed to like just stop somebody, that's when I would really pull out the possession. So it definitely wasn't, it's not the reason that I don't think it's his primary motivation for being on your team. I think he brings a lot of really nice things to your affiliation, not the least of which is his power control and his ability to really ruin somebody's day between his spender attack that burns power and then the sap power on his builder, spirit venom, and all of that stuff. So he's a very denial. He's a denial kind of piece, and that's how I kind of use him. Is I'll send him after the person who, you know, if there's an Iron Fist on the side, Josh. If Josh is playing Iron Fist, which Josh always is playing Iron Fist, I will specifically send Voodoo after Iron Fist to strip away his power so he can't build to the Iron Fist. Especially once he starts getting close, and I think it's going to be dangerous. If I don't think Iron Fist is going to be relevant, you know, I might go after like Thor, Daredevil, anyone who has, or, you know, even Enchantress, you can really mess with her. If you see her a lot on the table, thanks to possession and then the ability to just burn away her power, and kind of like restrict what she's able to do, what she wants to do. And those are, so for me, he's just like this big control piece that also can deal out a fair amount of damage. You know, he's got the big throw. So keeping Brother Daniel on him for that is also really useful. All those things kind of like factor in to the playstyle. And so I find that his best work is done when you kind of identify, okay, who's my opponent counting on the most right now? What in Voodoo's kit can come through and really like mess that up? And for me, that's a type of playstyle I really like, and I find really like fascinating and fun because you're puzzle solving and you're using what you have. So it also kind of leads me to make sure that Voodoo is typically going sometime in the mid to end activation. Like, I don't normally use him as my first go because I want to be able to see like what he's going to do. And then, of course, if you're playing Convocation, you have access to some of the tactic cards. Astral Strike can be really useful for him because it allows him to really like exert his board presence in a way. There are a couple others that haven't been shown yet that can also be really impactful. Of course, Orb of Agamotto is useful for everyone situationally, depending on what's going on there. So it really comes down to kind of identifying what you need and then getting the most out of Voodoo's kit, of which he has a lot, to make sure that your opponent can't get that. Yep, it's just terrain. Okay, I need a bit more. I gotta get more fuchsia out because I'm running out. All right, that's perfect. So, I'm just gonna finish out these couple of balls. I can't actually answer that without looking at the card because I know we play tested it both ways. And I honestly don't remember what the final text on the card says. The downsides of working on this stuff over a year ago, almost two now, honestly, and seeing a couple of different iterations. I want to say that the Astral Ring wound up with only attacks being measured from him because of other interactions with things, but oh, there you go. See, attacks are super. So it did get in. So there you go. Yeah, I couldn't remember. I know we had done it a couple different ways in testing, and there were some characters that broke it one way, and then I think things changed a little bit as things iterate and stuff, like they always do, and then kind of shifts and muddies around. Huh. Well, you see, we're assuming that Loki actually is in the affiliation. So I can give you a spoiler right now, I guess, chat, and say that even though Loki might be in the bar, he doesn't necessarily get invited to all the cool kids parties. He's a bit of a gate crasher. It's unfortunate because of the way the art is like worked out, but one of the things that you notice is he looks pretty sheepish, and he's getting the side eye from a lot of characters. Like maybe he's not supposed to be there, and he's being a little mischievous. So, all right. So we got some really cool like purple magenta fades going on here. It's looking really nice. Pretty happy with this. Mess around a little bit. Oop. I just want to go in. No. And finish that off. Oh yeah, Convocation is really cool. Very fun. They obviously have a very significant drawback in their physical defenses, as I think everyone's noticed, and Voodoo is one of those ones that makes up for it a little bit. Since he boasts that very solid 4 dice on his defense if Brother Voodoo is with him. Convocation, it was fun because we originally talked about if we were going to do a new affiliation for these mystic characters that we were working on, and or would they just kind of wind up getting slotted into other affiliations? And we were reading in the midst of one of the new Doctor Strange runs at the time, which now is a couple of years old, obviously. where Galactus winds up getting shifted over to the dark dimension, and in his hunger he starts eating magic, and this is of course a really awful thing for the universe and everything. And so Doctor Strange has to pull together all of the folks from the bar with no name to help battle this magically infused devourer of galaxies and all this stuff. And he mentions, I'm putting together this convocation of sorcerers, and that's where we kind of got the idea from. But then we kind of took it further and we said, well, we have all these different great folks who have been the Sorcerer Supreme and all this, so what if we kind of opened it up and made it weird and different? And we just had a good time with it, and we really let ourselves kind of explore and mess around with some of the fundamentals of the game design, because it felt like that's what Magic users would do, as they would really like start to screw with the expectations, and Magic itself doesn't really follow the same rules as everyone else has to follow. And it was fun. It was very fun to kind of get to mess with that and see what we could come up with, and again, just do some unexpected and weird stuff, and watch as the testers kind of lost their minds over it, and internally we got to really screw around with stuff and have some fun. All right. It's true. Two Doctor Stranges in the same photo would be a little weird marketing or not, for sure. All right, I'm just going to kind of go through and just want to punch up a little bit of this magenta. But hopefully, as we're talking about all the cool stuff Convocation does, and I haven't really been discussing too much about what's going on with the paint, but it's because it's been the same process throughout. You're kind of seeing now how you can do this stuff, do larger terrain pieces, and especially cool effects and fades and stuff with just a couple of brushes, and no airbrush. Like airbrushes are great, don't get me wrong, I enjoy having them, but I mostly just use mine these days for priming. I don't do enough miniature airbrushing on stuff, and it's probably something I should work a little more at when it all comes down to it. But by the same token, I find that I can get very similar results from just using brushes and either wet blending or dry brushing, stippling. There's so many ways to get really nice stuff, really nice results that don't require the airbrush but kind of mimic the airbrush. So you don't have to feel like you're missing out or that you can't paint terrain or anything like that. Just get a bigger brush and get some makeup brushes. Those work really well. Start stabbing things. Covered a lot of bigger miniature painting with stippling and everything like that, which is a great way to go about it. So you can definitely make it work in a really nice way. So you can see, we got this really cool color shift on these little dark dimensional balls, and everything's kind of modeled and different and looks weird. Like I said, you could have done this with a silver undercoat. Used a little bit of sprayed it with a silver undercoat, gone over it like this, and then you'd have some extra shine and some sheen to it, maybe sparkly. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this stuff and make it work. So now we're going to go to the rocks. We got 15 minutes left. So what I'm going to use for this is I'm going to use some Miskatonic Gray. And all I want to do is, actually, do I want to do that? We're only 15 minutes. I don't think I have time for that to dry. Maybe instead, let's find some, this will work. We use some decay black. We'll just turn this into a wash and we'll wash this over the rocks. And we'll wind up getting a bunch of it on our fingers, but that's okay. I think for this, I am going to shift over to one of my makeup brushes because I just want to be able to do this quick. And I just want to thin this out really quick. And I'm just going to kind of go through. And I didn't thin that out quite enough, so I'll just grab a little bit more water. I'll start pulling it across. And I'm just going to kind of go through and I'm going to wash it over all this area. Honestly, probably could have grabbed a bigger makeup brush too, but that's okay. Keep going. I'm just going to kind of like tint, because we did this Zenith Primed Gray, which is also really important for getting the really nice color pop on the stuff, is obviously you want to make sure that you're using a light base coat. I don't think you definitely wouldn't have to do a Zenith Prime in order to get what we've done here done, but 100% utilizing a light base coat for brighter colors is going to pay off dividends, because we wouldn't have been able to wet blend over a black or even a dark gray. It needed to be the lighter color. And then what we'll do is we'll just kind of tint this color down with a little bit of this washy mix from our decay black, and then we can go back through and we can, once this is dry, do a quick dry brush to kind of bring it back up. And I would use like a rainy gray or maybe that Miskatonic gray as the dry brush to get to my concrete, or if I wanted this to be asphalt, I could go back through with like an even darker, like a black wash, and do some more contrasty black to it and just really deepen it up. But for me, I think, overall I would do this as a concrete. And so I wouldn't do it as asphalt. So I just go back through and then I would dry brush all of it back up with a nice light gray. I'll probably miss some areas here while I'm working on the camera. But that's all right too. So we can go through and clean all that up as we need to. And the big thing is just going back through and hitting like all these areas here with that color. And again, maybe we shouldn't have started with that orange and yellow because it's the lightest color, but also if we hadn't, we would have had to go back through and probably reclaim a lot of the spillover area. Get in there, darken that up. And then of course you can see, like, as we pull this over, here's where we have a lot of that orange. We could just leave if we wanted to. We could recover it. All up to whatever we want to do. Pull that around, pull that down. So you kind of see, like, if we were to go back and do the two brush blend over the stuff, we'd get kind of these nice areas of warmth and highlight, all that stuff, which would kind of give us that, you see how we have that little bit of fake, OSL going on there. Just kind of using this brush to pull up some of our pool, because working with these really wet paints, they will go right into those crevices and cracks, and they can be very problematic depending on what you want. So just do a little bit of cleanup. Overall, it's terrain, so I never like worry too much about making it perfect either. I'm just kind of let that dry. So you can see here how we've got everything looking really great, and almost with like 10 minutes to go, just a little bit of cleanup in areas where we might want to hit some stuff up. So for example, We can grab a little bit more of that tea matte orange if we want to. Like right here where we had some paint spill over, we'd come back through and effectively just start a wet blend process over again. Or we could just do more of a traditional like shade highlight and just not cover up the wet blend completely. For instance, we might just hit this like that. Do that deeper color in there. Maybe come over here to this area where the purple is. And just kind of like work a little bit of that orange back through. And all of this is just kind of dependent on your desires and the final results. None of it's required. Again, we have a rent in reality. So if it's a little sloppy and stuff, I don't think that's a big deal. Too much. US release date for Dormammu Blade. I don't know if BK has heard anything. I know that there is a delay due to the rail system delays that are happening all across shipping in the country. But I don't know if we have an actual date yet. So unfortunately, they won't be making it to the US folks on Friday the 13th. Your best bet is to check with your local retailer just to see how things are going. I don't know if we have like dates yet for when those things are expected otherwise. But as we know, I know BK's been trying really hard to make sure that everyone's aware of what's going on and that those dates are getting posted and updated as soon as we know anything back to social media and the different channels. So come back in here. I'm going to work a little bit of this yellow in before we call it quits. Before we call time for today. I just want to work a little bit of that color back in there just to lighten it up, make it smoother. Top here like that. There. Ooh, yeah, look at that. See, now we're just wet blending with our purples and even making a darker kind of like exterior color. So all this can work to your advantage if you just play with it a little bit. Like I said, once it's dry, go back through and you can do it all over again. So I think there, I'm pretty happy. Ooh. I'm just going to do one last little yellow right here. Just going to show that flame is licking up our weird magma stuff. And I want it's only interactive in like it only does things rules related in the ultimate encounter, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't, make up your own house rules for it if you wanted to. I certainly think in your own like friendly narrative games or whatever, things of the house, making up those kinds of like rules that everyone knows and wants to play with makes the game just more fun and enjoyable, helps tell the story better. So if you wanted everyone to get a condition well around it, certainly there's arguments for a lot of different ones. I could see Incinerate being a super powerful one. Hex certainly makes sense, given that it's all weird and universally warpy. You could do something like Slow, because time works differently and stuff like that. Lots of different options and opportunities there for cool things like that if you wanted to do it. But as far as like terrain having specific game rules, we always keep that pretty purely for ultimate encounters and narrative scenarios and stuff, rather than just the basic game, because it's, how would you cost that, and what does that mean for players and all of that stuff. So that's very much if you want to do it in your play groups, you absolutely should because it's super cool. But from just a general standpoint, it's just terrain in a normal game. All right, so there we go. So there is our really rough and ready dimensional terrain. You can see how even just that wash already gave our rocks a really nice look. I super dig how all the purples came out. Oh no, we got a little orange right there. I'll have to fix that. It's okay though, it's an easy fix. Outside of our little mistake, which we can tidy up here. Just a bit of wet blending in 1 hour, and we got ourselves some really cool looking dimensional rift terrain. So again, you could do this with yellows and greens. You could do all of it with the oranges and reds. There's so many different colors, like basically just pick 2 colors that mix together really nice. Find those colors that will create really nice midtones and stuff, and then just start playing with them. And you could do different colors on the different Cocoa Puffs. You could shift, we could have it turn into like a green yellow or a red yellow, all that stuff. There's so many opportunities to play and just have a great time messing around with these colors. So with that, I hope that you all enjoyed our hour together. I hope you're excited about all this Mystic stuff. Again, be sure to tune in on Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific, as several of us are going to go through the Dormammu Ultimate Encounter. So if you're curious about how this terrain plays in that, how Dormammu looks in an Ultimate Encounter, what the next big bad coming to Marvel Crisis Protocol is able to do at their full power level, you should definitely show up for that. Otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Dallas Kemp will be painting up something really cool. And then, of course, we'll be back on Friday as well. So we've got 3 more days of streaming, all at 1 p.m. Pacific, with the big Dormammu game happening this Thursday. Till next time, everybody stay good to each other. Continue to show us all the cool stuff that you're doing on Instagram using hashtag Painting Protocol. This month's challenge is, oh my gosh, I forgot it. I knew it and I forgot. Bump in the night. Bump in the night. So be sure to show us anything that you feel fits that bill. And then otherwise, folks, have a great one. Be good to each other. And we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.